Assalamualaikum and good morning to one and all. Today we'll study about part 5 of drug discovery and development. I am Professor Sheikh Abu Sufyan. Welcome you to my YouTube channel Pharma Learning Forever. At the end of this e-learning session, you are able to discuss decision making process and interim review of ethical committee and explain GCP, that is good clinical practices guidelines. So let's start with the first part of the session, that is decision making process. So the decision making process, especially of the ethical committee, so it is not done single handedly, but it must be taken in broad consensus. What do you mean by broad consensus? We have seen the ethical committee consists of the number of members. So minimum there must be the 5 members to form the quorum, and there must be 5 to 7 or 12 to 15 members present in the ethical committee. Now when you take the meeting of ethical committee and protocol is being discussed, that time you get the recommendation and suggestion from different members of the committee based on their experience and role and responsibility. Now when the chairperson of the committee, who is generally from outside the institute, must take any decision in the broad consensus by considering the opinion and recommendation of all those members of ethical committee. So the decision must be taken in the broad consensus, and once the decision has been done, after that those decisions must be communicated in writing by the member secretary. So we have seen in the case of ethical committee, one of the member of ethical committee is a member secretary. So the member secretary, he is responsible to take care of the coordination part and do the official coordination part of the ethical committee. Now this member secretary, once the recommendation and decision it is done by the chairperson, will be communicating the decision in writing to the sponsor as well as the investigator. Okay, so this is about the decision making and their communication in the writing to the sponsor and the investigation. Next portion is that if the member has or his own proposal for the review. For example, there are the ethical committee members who are themselves are the investigator. They are involved in the research, they are involved in the clinical trial. If they have their own proposal for the review, then in such case you should remember that the member should not participate when project is discussed. So when project it is discussed within a quorum, in that quorum the member should not be a part of decision making process. Why he should not be the part of decision making process? Because it is his or her own proposal. So when you are putting ahead your own proposal, then generally some portion of favor goes to your own the protocol as compared to other protocols, right? So to avoid any such problem or any such the favor by the member of the committee, you should see that if any member having their own proposal in for the discussion, then such member should not participate when project it is discussed or decision is being taken. Okay, so this is the second part in the decision making process. In addition to this, suppose it could possible that when you have taken the decision, sometime decision it is positive, like you are telling investigator to go ahead with the study, but sometime the decision may be negative as well. So if any negative decision is there, then such negative decision always supported by clear defined reason why negative decision is being taken. So that must be clearly justified so that he may go back and he may provide some additional data if needed, or he may convince that the negative decision it is taken in favor of the participant, in favor of the sponsor, because if some study which is not foresee as good for the future, and if permission it is being given, then may sponsor may spend the amount that may go into the vein, because at some step after the trial maybe adverse effect may be detected or some problem may be detected which may lead to the termination of the trial. So if trial it is terminated, so whatever amount it is spent till that time will go into the vein, right? So if any negative decision is there, then such negative decision always supported by clearly defined reason, so that both the sponsors and the investigator, he must be convinced with your decision. Okay, so this is the third point in case of the decision making process. The fourth point is that IIC may reverse its positive decision as well. Now suppose maybe IIC has already given the approval, you have started with your study. It is quite possible that during the process of the study, IIC may reverse its positive decision. Now let's see in which case IIC can reverse their positive decision. For example, in case where the IIC may be receiving information that may adversely affect the risk benefit ratio. Maybe it is happening that you have started with the trials, and during the trial, maybe the first phase of the trial, it was observed that there is more adverse effect, and due to that the risk it is increased as compared to the benefit to the patient. So if that is the case, then IIC may reverse its positive decision maybe during the conduct of the trial and ask investigator and sponsor to terminate that study at that point. Okay, so this could also be possible. So this is the fourth the point in case of decision making process. The fifth one, it is discontinuation of the trial. So sometime in some cases discontinuation of trial should also be ordered by the IIC. Now what are those cases where you can order the discontinuation of the trial? So for example, if the goal of trial is already being achieved, maybe you did some study, and after doing study you may feel that the goal of trial it is achieved, and since goal of trial it is achieved, so if that is the case, then there is no sense in going ahead with the study, because if actually already goal of the study if it is achieved, and if you are still conducting the study, then in that case you are unnecessarily exposing the participant to the drug, and that is ethically not permitted. Okay, so discontinuation of the trial should be ordered if goal of the trial is already being achieved or it give unequivocal result. Now what can be unequivocal result? Unequivocal result means you have getting some the doubtful result, or you may have getting some ambiguous result. So in both the cases, if you get doubtful or ambiguous result, then also you can discontinue the trial. So these are the different possibility in the process of the decision making process. In addition to that, there could be possibility of premature termination. So in case of premature termination, if it is done by the investigator or the sponsor, so this can also be possible. So some decisions are reversed by the ethical committee, and now somewhere the sponsor and investigator himself want to terminate the trial. So in such premature termination, the notification with the reason for termination can be given by the investigator or the sponsor if they are terminating from their side, and by the ethical committee members or the chairperson of the ethical committee if they are ordering premature termination of the trial. So such notification with the reason for termination should be given, and when you are doing this, then before completely terminating the study, you must also see that the summary of the result conducted till date must also be given in that particular document. So before premature termination, you are also giving the summary of the result, so that can be used as a reference point maybe for others who are doing the trials in the future. Okay, so this is about the premature termination, if that is the case maybe by the investigator or the sponsor, or maybe if it is done by the ethical committee. There are some circumstances which require matter to be brought to the IAC. So now you are conducting the trial, you are investigator and you are the sponsor. There are some conditions where you must brought some matters for the IAC, or those things must be brought into the notice of the IAC. Now let's see what are those circumstances. For example, if there is amendment to the protocol, maybe you have already taken approval for the protocol, but during process of the trial you may feel that you need to change some methodology. you need to change the dose, you need to change the dosing frequency. If that is the case, then such amendment in the protocol must be brought to the notice of the ISC, and with their approval you can go ahead with the further study. Okay, so the amendment to the protocol. Secondly, unexpected adverse event. Suppose you have started the study and you did risk benefit ratio earlier, but during the process of risk benefit ratio calculation you have not foresee that adverse event, right? आपने फ्यूचर में होने वाला ये नहीं सोचा था, but now you already started the study and suddenly you observe that the patient suffering from unexpected adverse event. If that is the case, then such adverse event must also be brought to the notice of the ISC committee. Next, if any new information that may influence the conduct of the study. So you have started the study and you get some new data. For example, in case of aspirin, it was used earlier as the NSAID. Now aspirin is used as an anticoagulant. It is used as the antiplatelet drug, right? So it is now used. Why? Because after starting with the study, it is observed that the aspirin has got that particular advantage, that particular pharmacological action. So if any such new information that if you received while conducting the trial, and if you feel that may influence the conduct of the study, then such information can also be brought to the notice of the ISC committee. Okay, then if necessary, applicant invited to present the protocol. But suppose if your study is very complicated, then in that case the applicant can be invited to present the protocol. And suppose the ISC members, they feel that it is not needed, then sometime you may not call that person to present the protocol. Okay, then subject expert may be invited. Suppose the study is complicated, you having the ISC member who are not expert in the field of the study that is proposed by the investigator. If that is the case, then you can invite the subject expert from the outside, so and you can take their views regarding that particular study. Okay, so subject expert may be invited to offer their views, but you should see that they should not take part in the decision making process. You can just taking their recommendation, you can just taking their views, but they are not influencing the decision. So decision must be taken in the broad consensus with the designated member of ethical committee only. You have invited outside member just to take their views, but decision must be taken by the chairperson with the opinion or with the broad consensus of the all designated ethical committee members. Okay, next one. However, opinion must be recorded. You must record their opinion. It's not like they are giving opinion. They are telling you that it may lead to some adverse effect in the future. So you cannot even totally ignore their opinion. You must record their opinions, and by considering their opinion, you are taking the decision. Now you have conducted the meeting and all the ISC members were present in the meeting. Sometime maybe the protocol was also presented by the applicant and many things were discussed. Then in such meeting, or whatever things were discussed in that particular meeting, so the minutes of meeting of should be recorded and which should be approved and signed by the chairperson. So whatever was discussed, whatever opinion was given by each and every members, including subject experts, so everything must be recorded in the form of minutes of meeting, right? And it should be approved and signed by the chairperson of that particular committee. So this is all about the decision making. Let's quickly see about the interim review. Now what is interim review? The interim review, it is the meeting generally scheduled twice in a year. Means every 6 months you schedule the meeting of the ethical committee, but there could be possible that you are scheduling ethical committee meeting on some other day which was not decided earlier. So that is called as the interim review. Now let's see in which cases interim review it is needed. Okay, so it shall be decided by the ISC instead of waiting for scheduled date of meeting to conduct any interim review if necessary. So this can be done or the interim review can be done for the following reason. Let's see what are those reasons where although meeting it is scheduled after the 6 months, but you have called the meeting of the ISC committee well in advance. And why it should be called well in advance? and why you have conducted the interim review. Let's see the reason. Okay, so the first reason could be re-examination of the proposal already been examined by the institutional ethical committee. Maybe you want to re-examine the proposal, maybe due to the adverse effect, maybe due to the side effect. If you feel that the patient suffering from the ADR, then you should not wait till next proposed meeting, which is maybe 3 months after the adverse effect it is reported. So you can immediately call the meeting and take some proper decision about that particular protocol. So the re-examination of proposal already examined by the IAC, you can call the interim review if necessary. Secondly, the research study of the minor nature. Now suppose if you feel that you are conducting the minor study, or maybe the case report where the few patients were reported with some adverse drug reaction during the conduct of the study. If that is the case, in those cases also you can call the interim review, right? Third important thing, it is the urgent proposal of national interest. So in such case also you can call for the interim review. So nowadays the many pharmaceutical company, they are working on the drug for the treatment of the COVID-19. So the drug for the treatment of COVID-19, it is the urgent proposal of national interest. So instead of waiting till for the scheduled date of the conduct of the ethical committee meeting, you can call the meeting well in advance so that the national interest can be met and the benefit can be given to the mankind. Okay, so these are three conditions where interim review can be called by the ethical committee. Now let's quickly see what are the different record that one has to maintain after conduct of the ethical committee meeting. So the record should be maintained for at least a period of 5 years for the following documents. So this is very important, because you must see that you have, if you are conducting trial today, then at least for 5 years those documents should be maintained as a record, right? Why? Because it could possible that there some legal issue you may come across, and to justify with that legal issue you may need those documents. Okay, so the record should be maintained for at least a period of 5 years. Let's see what record need to maintain. So I'm just quickly going ahead with those documents because no explanation is required. So the first document, it is the composition of the IAC. Who are the members, what is their designation, so that composition of IAC. Secondly, the curriculum vitae of each and every member of the IAC, also the investigator and the sponsor. Then standard operating procedure, which were proposed by the investigator and sponsor, and it was approved by the institutional ethical committee. Okay, so those standard operating procedure. Then national and international guidelines that you are following for the said trials. So those guidelines should be also maintained as a record. Then copies of the protocol, data collection format, investigational brochures. Okay. Then all correspondence with the institutional ethical committee, means whatever correspondence you are doing with the ethical committee, maybe the investigator has sent the protocol, has reported some adverse drug reaction, has reported some new information related to the trial. So all those correspondence which is between the investigators and or between the sponsor and the IAC must also be maintained for 5 years. Okay. Then agenda and minutes of IAC meeting. Then copies of decision communicated to the applicant by the IAC committee. So whatever the decision will happen, so those copies, and record of all notification issue for premature termination of study with the summary of the reason. What are the reason for premature termination of the study? So entirely with those summary also you need to provide documents or you need to keep the documents for 5 years. Okay. Lastly, the final report of the study, including the microfilm, then CDs and a video recording. Suppose during conduct of the trials, in some studies, some complicated study, as a proof of the study that you did, or maybe the behavioral study that you may have studied in case of the patient, you also need to have the video recording. So the microfilm, CDs and video recordings of which is taken during conduct of the trial can also be kept for the 5 years. Okay, so we have seen about the decision making process, we have seen about the interim review, and we have seen about what are the different documents that need to be recorded and kept for at least 5 years after conduct of the trial. Okay, now before going ahead with the next part of the session, let's have quick the question and answer part. Okay, so my first question is, in which cases IAC can discontinue the trial. Yes. So let's see who give the first answer. Yes, I am waiting for your answer. In which cases IAC can discontinue the trial? Okay, so I can see the Nurun Nisa given the first answer if goal of trial is already being achieved. Okay. Okay, again second answer could be it give unequivocal result. So that could be also the result. So two important reason if goal of the trial is already being achieved, and second one is if there is any case of unequivocal, ambiguous or doubtful result, if that is the case, then also you can order the termination of the study, okay, or premature termination of the study. So that could be the possibility. My second question is when interim review is necessary. What are those cases where interim review it is absolutely necessary? Yes. So we have seen the few reasons where instead of waiting for scheduled date of the meeting, you conduct the trials before scheduled date of the meeting. So that is called as the interim review. So you just tell me in which cases the interim review it is absolutely necessary. So let's see who give the first answer about interim review. Okay, so first answer again given by the Nurun Nisa. So re-examination of proposal already examined by the IAC. Yes, so that is one of the reason. Second reason it is research study of minor nature. Re-examination of the study which is already been done. What is the third reason for interim review? I can see Kavita has given about third review. She has mentioned that urgent proposal of the national interest. Okay, so any urgent proposal of the national interest, if you are dealing with, then in such cases also you can go ahead with the interim review. Okay, so there are three important reasons. The re-examination of the proposals which is already been examined. Second reason could be it is the study of the minor nature. Third reason could be it is any study which is of the national interest and which is the urgent one, like I have given the example of the COVID-19. So in such cases you can go for the interim review. You should not wait for scheduled date of examination or the meeting of the IAC. Let's go ahead with third question. Enlist few records that is to be maintained for conduct of the trial. We have seen that there are total 7 to 8 records that we need to maintain. You just enlist the few records that we need to maintain for after conduct of the trial. So we have seen at least we need to maintain for 5 to 6 years. So the first answer again given by Nurun Nisa, that is copies of protocol, data collection and the format. So this is one of the reason. Curriculum vitae could be the second documents. SOP, Saqib has mentioned about the SOP, the composition of the IAC. Nice. Copies of protocol, I can see you all are active. National and international guideline, Ashab has mentioned that. Okay, agenda and minutes of meeting, again Saqib has given that answer. Copies of decision, so whatever decisions will happen, so all those decision copies, agenda and the minutes. Few things are still missing, I have not seen those answers still. Record of all notification issue for premature termination of study. Kavita has given that answer. Nice, Kavita. I have not seen answer like microfilm, video recording, okay, CDs. So all those documents can also be maintained for at least 5 years after conduct of the trials. Okay. Investigational brochure. Shaheen has mentioned that. Yes, you need to maintain data collection format, investigational brochures. Okay, so all these documents that is to be maintained at least for 5 years after conduct of the study. So I have done with this first part of the session. Let's go ahead with the second part of today's session. So the second part we'll see about the special consideration and the good clinical practices guidelines. Okay, so let's start with the first, that is special consideration. So when you are doing the study or when the ethical committee reviews certain study, then in such cases special consideration shall be given for the research which is involving the children, suppose child is involved in the research, or the pregnant and lactating women and vulnerable subject like the elderly patient. So now if you look at the type of the trial that I have mentioned, these are come under the special category because these are the special population like the children's, pregnant and lactating women and vulnerable elderly subjects. All these are special people. So when you are working with the trials related to this or research related to children's, pregnant and lactating women and vulnerable subject, then in such case the ethical committee must give special consideration, right? And accordingly decision can be taken. So we have seen about the ethical committee composition, their responsibility, their uses. We have also seen about how decision it is to be taken, in which case interim review can be called by the ethical committee, and what are the documentation and special consideration of the ethical committee. Okay, now let's start with the good clinical practices. Although you may feel that some of the guidelines of the GCP are same as the ethical principle, but still you must remember that we need to follow this guideline, because the GCP, this is something which you need to strictly follow during conduct of the trial. You must be following these GCP guidelines, because this is something which is internationally recognized guidelines that investigator and the sponsor both have to follow while conducting the trial. Okay, so let's see about the good clinical practices. What are the GCPs? So it is a international quality standards which is provided by ICH. Okay, and what is ICH? ICH, it is basically an international body that defines the standards for the clinical trials. So it is international body that defines standard for the clinical trials. Once it is the ICH has defined the guideline for the clinical trials, or when they have defined the standard for the clinical trial, now it is the roles and responsibility of the respective government of the countries to see that these guidelines are transposed into the regulation, right? Because these are internationally recognized guidelines. So once these are finalized, or suppose if these guidelines are revised in the future, so no matter how many revisions are there, now it is the responsibility of the government to see that those guidelines are followed, and now those guidelines are not just a guideline, but now these are the rules and regulations which must be transposed by the government. And if someone is not following that, then they should not give approval for launching that drug into the market. Okay, so during conduct of the trials, all these guidelines must be followed. So let's see what are those guidelines. So the principle of the ICH GCP is the clinical trial should be conducted in accordance with the ethical principle. We have seen total 10 ethical principles as per revised Wellman report. Okay, so now your ICH guidelines or GCP guidelines also say that the clinical trial should be conducted in accordance with the ethical principle. You have to follow the ethical principle during the conduct of the trials, and also inconsistent with applicable regulatory authority. Now this regulatory authority may change from country to country, right? Like in India, it is the Indian FDA. Somewhere, if you are conducting research in the US, it could be the US FDA. Likewise, the authority may change, like the CDSCO, it is one of the authority which control the drug. So authority may change from country to country or from place to place. But you must see that you are following ethical principle and also following the rules and regulation or regulatory requirements of the respective authority of your own countries or your own place where that clinical trial is being conducted. So this is the first basic principle of the ICH GCP. A trial it is initiated. Now what you need to see is that, or the ethical committee member, when they are reviewing the trial, they should see that, or they should calculate the risk to the patient. So there must be foreseeable risk, and inconvenience should be weighed against anticipated benefit. What can be the foreseeable risk? Foreseeable risk means based on your experience and the drug that is proposed by the investigator, those clinical pharmacologists are forcing that it may lead to so and so adverse effect in the future. ओके, तो अभी तक हुआ नहीं है, लेकिन वो कह रहे हैं कि ये हो सकता है, बिकॉज द ड्रग हैविंग सेम केमिकल स्ट्रक्चर, ड्रग हैविंग द सेम नेचर of the drug which already reported with some adverse drug reaction. So they are forcing that risk in the future, and they are forcing some inconvenience to the patient. So looking at these risk, inconvenience, they can weigh this against anticipated benefit, and based on that they can take the decision whether to allow for the trial or not to allow for the trial. Okay, so should be done before a trial it is initiated, and then it can be initiated only if anticipated benefit it justify the risk. Okay, so whatever problem is there or whatever risk is there, it should be less as compared to benefit. So benefit should be more to the patient as compared to the risk. If that is the case, then only you can go ahead with that particular trial. So this is the guideline before a trial it is initiated. In addition to this, the risk, safety and well-being of the trial subject are the most important consideration. So it should not be ignored at any point of conduct of the study. So the first priority must be given to ensure the right, safety and well-being of the trial subject. Okay, so this is the first important consideration, and it should prevail over interest of the science and the society. No matter how important your study is and how beneficial your study to the science as well as the society, but it should not oversee the right, safety and well-being of the trial subject. So we have seen in case of the Tuskegee syphilis study, these guidelines were ignored, and that was the reason in 1997 the present president of that time, the Bill Clinton, has apologized to the participant of the trials and to the relatives of the trials whose the relative were died during the conduct of the Tuskegee syphilis study. In addition to that, the available non-clinical and clinical information. Now what is non-clinical information? The information that you received specially from the animal study. So that is non-clinical information. What is clinical information? Maybe you have done your phase 0 study in very small number of population. Okay, so both available non-clinical or clinical information on investigational product should be adequate, should be sufficient to support proposed clinical trial. Now if you feel that the non-clinical data or the clinical data which is available till date during the proposal were submitted for the approval, if it is not sufficient, then the ethical committee members or the regulatory authority can ask for additional study, additional non-clinical clinical study before permitting that investigator for the start with the clinical trial from phase 1 to phase 3. Okay, so before start of this, they can ensure that you having sufficient non-clinical as well as clinical information which help you to taking the decision regarding whether to say yes or whether to reject that particular protocols. Okay, so this is very important guideline. Then in addition to this, it should be scientifically sound and described in clear and detailed protocol. So whatever proposal which is submitted especially by the investigator, it should have a scientifically sound information and it should be described very clearly with detailed protocol with each and every step, right from step 0 to the completely till the phase 3 of the clinical trial. Everything you need to mention step by step with clear definition of what you are going to do and what procedure you are going to follow. Okay, so that must be submitted to the ethical committee. Then it should be conducted in compliance with the protocol that receive prior approval of independent ethical committee. Now ISC may have given the approval and you have started with the trials, you are investigator and you have started with the trial. So when you are conducting this trial, you must see that you are sticking to the protocol which is approved by independent ethical committee. If any change if you want to do, then you can propose it as an amendment in the protocol, take the approval of the IC and then only you can go ahead with that study. It should not happen that your protocol it is something else and you are doing something else while conduct of the trial. No way it should happen during conduct of the trial. Okay, so this is another important point of consideration which is one of the important guidelines of the ISC. Okay, next point, it is the medical care should be given and medical decision made on behalf of the subject should always be responsibility of qualified physician. Now sometime it could be possible that for taking decision of the patient, the decision is the patient it is not in a condition to take the decision. Like maybe he may be unconscious or he may be suddenly suffer from some problem or he may go into the coma. Now what is happening? The decision will be taken by the investigator on behalf of that subject, right? So when you are taking such a decision on behalf of that particular subject, then such decision should always be the responsibility of qualified physician. You cannot say that it is done inadvertently, that patient is die by mistake. You should not say that. You must take the ownership of that. You must take the responsibility of that, because you were qualified physician and you have taken the decision on behalf of that particular subject. Okay, so you need to take the ownership of all the decision. Then each individual who is involved in conducting the trial should be qualified by education, training and experience. So this is also one of the ethical principle, and that is also given in the form of the guideline of the ICH. Okay, the next which is also part of the ethical principle, that is informed consent should be obtained from every subject. So each and every subject you must obtain informed consent. Without that consent you should not go ahead with the study. Okay, then all clinical trial information should be recorded, handled and stored in the way that it should be easy, or it allow you its accurate reporting, interpretation and verification, because that is very important. Because if you have the documents and if some authority or government agency coming to you and asking to produce the data, then in such case you should not take more time to produce that data in front of the committee, right? So it should be stored or recorded or handles, that it should allow its accurate reporting, its accurate interpretation and verification of the data as and when it is demanded or requested by ethical committee member or concerned regulatory authority. Okay, so this is about the data, the ICH guideline related to data. Then the confidentiality of the record, which is another ethical principle that you need to follow. All the record, the confidentiality must be maintained. So the confidentiality of the record that could identify the subject should be protected in accordance with applicable regulatory requirement. You should not disclose identity of the subject who are involved in the clinical trials, right? And so you must have mechanism which help you to protect the identity of such subject, that and to see that the confidential data it is leak into a public domain, right? So that identity of the subject can be easily protected. So you must have that mechanism to protect the identity of the subject. Okay, next point, it is about investigational products should be manufactured, handled and stored in accordance with the GMP only. So what is GMP? GMP, it is the good manufacturing practices that is followed in the industry after drug it is launched into the market, and if you want to bring that drug into the market. So although drug it is not bring it to the market, but still you have to see that it is manufactured, handled and stored in accordance with the good manufacturing practices only. Okay, and they should be used in accordance with the approved protocol. It should not be used the way the investigator want, the way sponsor want, but it should be used in accordance with approved protocol. So you will be taking approval that maybe for phase 1 you will be needing this much amount of the drug, so you will be manufacturing that much amount of drug only. Likewise, the system with the procedure that assure the quality of every aspect of the trial should be implemented. So when you are conducting the trial, in order to ensure the quality of the trial, you need to develop some standard operating procedure so that quality can be maintained, and those standard operating procedure should be implemented. Means you are following all those procedure during the conduct of the trial, and for each and every step you are following that particular standard operating procedure. Okay, so I have done with my session. I have gathered this information from the Dr. S.P. Agarwal Good Clinical Practices Guidelines, which were archived from the cdesco.government website. So I must thanks to this author for compiling the wonderful information and keeping this in the public domain. So I thanks for the author, and I thanks for the organization for making this information available online. So thanks for watching my session. For more such learning, subscribe to my channel, and if you like my session, then do remember to give me a thumbs up.